everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I am excited. I am excited for this one. Eric, thank you so much for joining me for this. It's gonna be fun.
No,
It's
it
gonna be
is
fun.
my pleasure. I'm so excited about this as well. I think this is a phenomenal topic, and I'm honored that I'm here to speak about it. So thank you.
I'm honored to have you. I hear amazing things. This is going to be my first foray into listening to you talk about this. It's a great topic. Guys, Eric Gislason over at Brown Harris Stevens. He has Archway Partners is the name of his little company over there. He talks about collaborative negotiation, negotiation mastery. It's a really good topic. We're going to take a break from sharing screens on UrbanDigs, bring in some new minds. With that, Eric, I'm going to just pass the torch, man, right to you. The floor is yours. I'll be in the background looking at questions, and if I
Great.
have a question, I might interfere as well. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks,
Take
Noah.
us
And
away.
I love to take questions. So if there are questions in the chat, comments, I'm part of what the way that I present and the way that I teach is I love a collaboration and an interaction. So if there are relevant questions or people want to ask something, fire away. Just let me know.
Awesome.
So the thing that excites me about this topic, because obviously, as all of you are as well, followers of Urban Digs and the amazing data and content that they bring to us on a daily and weekly basis, uh, there's this beautiful intersection between data and negotiation. And those of you who know me know Archway Partners, my coaching company, and know me as an agent. I am an agent at Brown Harris Stevens. I've been a real estate professional for 20 years, and I have been in the business as an agent, starting in rentals, a manager, a director of sales, director of development. I teach negotiation, collaborative negotiation tactics and techniques as an instructor nationally. So this topic is so near and dear to my heart. Now, the thing that I love about this topic is that data that Urban Digs gives us on a regular basis is so much at the core of how we influence everybody and how we deliver a value proposition day to day. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of start with, if you don't mind, Noah, is just the basics of what a value proposition is and how people make decisions. Because I'll go through that quickly, and that will then bring us to how do we think about how data and negotiation then intersect, and why data is so important to the negotiations that we have. So, in terms of a value proposition, many of you may know the very simple definition of a value proposition, but it is very simple. And it is essentially what we call a cost benefit analysis. Value is determined by a decision maker as they look at benefits relative to cost. V equals B over C. That's a cost benefit analysis. And I think a lot of us sometimes forget the what that menu of benefits looks like. What is the numerator of that equation? What does that look like, and how do we identify benefits that are tailored and that speak specifically to a specific decision maker? So that's the first thing I want you to think about is value is benefits over cost. So cost is your fee. Cost is the risk that a client takes on in order to work with you or work with someone else. So you've got the actual fee, the cost of the apartment. That could be the cost in the value proposition, but there's also that little c cost that is, hey, how do I evaluate this decision, and how do I acknowledge or understand what the risk reward or the risk that I'm taking on is relative to the benefits that I'm being offered. So that's the value proposition I want to just put into your head. And here, what we're going to do is talk about the benefit side of the value proposition, the numerator of that equation. So if we focus on benefits, how we understand value and benefits, the tools, the resources that we have at our disposal, as well as the expertise, which allows us to tie them specifically to that client. That is what's key. And data is a benefit if used correctly. Data can be a huge benefit for our clients. But if it's not used correctly, it's nothing more than a feature. And that's what we're trying to do with the value proposition, is take all of those things that are parts of our value add and take them from being a feature, something that is just, I have a great marketing department, or something that is just a display or a description of the services that you offer or the product that you're trying to sell, and turn it into a benefit which has utility. What does it do for the person making the decision? How do they interpret it? How do they understand it? And so a benefit is highly effective and a feature is going to land flat. So the big idea here as we are going is that data does not make decisions. People make decisions. Data informs our decisions. And why is that so impactful? Well, this is where our clients feel comfortable. It fits into that, what we call the sound logic persuasion principle. How people analyze data. For us as agents, sometimes takes the pressure off us, whether the client likes us or trusts us, and takes it into something that's irrefutable, something that seems factual, where there's evidence based, right? That's what data does for us if we just present it. And we feel like it takes that pressure off of us from a trust perspective, or a likability perspective. But as human beings, we're persuaded by seeing information that seems analyzed, seems recognizable, especially when it comes from somebody we trust. It takes information that's opinion, and makes it into objective fact, or if it's correctly used or not misused. So that's where we're starting off here. What do you think, Noah? Do you have questions? Any questions that we have in the chat?
I think you're rolling. Everyone, I put a little note in there. Send questions for Eric in the chat, but I think you're doing fantastic here. I'm eager to hear what you got going next.
Great. So without context, so this is where we take this now, is without context, without the clarity or the context of the data. What is data telling us? Data is telling us what has happened, like closed sales, price trends, days on market, absorption rate. It's telling us how frequently something is happening, like velocity, volume, direction, and it's telling us where change is occurring, neighborhoods, price bands, price ranges, product types, and then it's talking about relative comparisons, this versus that, now versus before, right? That, without any context, that's all that data tells us. It's descriptive and comparative, but it shows patterns, but it doesn't show intentions. What data does not tell us, and this is the big aha for how to use data in your negotiations, what data does not tell us is why a buyer is emotionally ready or hesitant, how risk tolerant the seller actually is, whether someone values certainty over financial upside, what the timing means to a specific buyer or seller, how fear, pressure, ego, life changes are influencing their behavior. So that is where we need to step in with influence and persuasion, our negotiation piece, and then match that with data and make the data clear, understandable, and relatable to them. Data can't tell us what the decision means to the person making it, and that's the big gap. All right. So how do we create that clarity? How do we create that clarity as a decision maker or as a negotiator? This becomes our persuasive advantage when we do something that's more than just presenting numbers. We create value when we can turn a piece of information, that feature, into something that has utility or a benefit, right? And the trap is where we get into a trap here is we have certain biases. So the data trap that we have is that we walk into a situation with something that's called certainty bias. We treat data as a crystal ball instead of what it looks like, what it's telling us from the rearview mirror. We overgeneralize, or we use overgeneralization. We apply market averages, something that might apply to many neighborhoods within a municipality, or many neighborhoods in New York City, or a whole state, or a whole country, and we start to take that overgeneralized data and apply it to a specific situation in order to make a decision. Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I have a question here. I thought it was an interesting one.
Yeah.
How do we curtail the data to different personality types? And I don't want to just derail you or anything, but
No, it's great.
yeah, if you can Speak to that.
That's where we're going with this. The idea is when we create a value proposition, what differentiates a value proposition from an elevator pitch is the fact that we are trying to tailor or tie that value proposition to the specific person across the table. How do we do that? We have to understand not only what their pain points are, what their objections are, what their wants and needs are, but we also have to understand them as a decision maker. And similar to the DISC profile, I categorize decision makers into four groups: the assertive driver, the analytic thinker, the collaborative feeler, and the expressive humanist. So you've got the assertive driver, someone who comes off as that very competitive negotiator type, that type A personality, someone who doesn't really care about your family. They don't want to know what color your dog is. They don't want to know any of that information. What they want to know is, how are you going to help them solve their problem, and why are you the best person for them to hire? In fact, for an assertive driver, the price piece, although they might use the price, the cost in that cost benefit analysis, they might use cost as an objection, but the reality is that is not really where their motivation lies. They are willing to pay for value as long as they can see that the benefits outweigh the cost, highly outweigh the cost. And that's the assertive driver. They don't want to be your friend, although they're going to be probably the most loyal client that you could ever have. They don't want a friendship. They don't want to read your testimonials. They want to know how you are going to solve their problem. And then you've got somebody on the other side of it, an expressive humanist, that really is looking at what is the win-win-win? What is that third win? How are the people that are impacted by our negotiation going to feel? How is the building going to feel about the new person who's living in the co-op? They want to know that the community is going to thrive and that the person who's going to take over their apartment loves it as much as they love their apartment. That's someone that's an expressive humanist that may not be as interested in how much they walk away with, their net gain from that property. They may want to know, how is everybody going to feel throughout this? And they want to make sure that everybody's brought along and everybody feels good. So it's really important that you know those decision makers and that you can identify them. You can look at behavioral cues and you can look at communication styles and then match them so that you're communicating effectively with them, because that's how they're going to be able to interpret, when we're talking about data, that's how they're going to be able to take that data that you understand and apply it to their specific situation.
Yeah, that's what I remind everyone, guys. We're all intuitive psychiatrists. All right, we're not practicing. We don't get paid to sit down and talk to someone on the couch. But we're all sizing up our clients all day long.
Yeah.
And you guys know you have A personalities. I'm glad you said that. It's a lot of psychology and all this. You have A personalities and you got B personalities. You got different personalities that are going on there, and you have to treat every single one of these differently. And there's a lot of trial and error going on here. You will make mistakes. You will treat an alpha dog as a beta dog one day, and you'll get bitten, so to speak. The important thing is that you go, you experience, you learn, you fail, you mess up, you say something wrong. If you show uncertainty and doubt to an alpha dog, they're going to eat you alive.
That's right.
Right. So alpha dogs respond to confidence. They respond to pure data, and they don't like their intelligence insulted, right?
That's right.
They would respect you more if you say, no, I can't predict the future. No, I do not know this answer. What I can tell you right now is what the data is showing, and I'm reading the tape for you. They'll respect you more. So thank you for bringing up that question, Bradley. I think it's a fantastic question. And again, I want you guys all to know that you're doing this all day long, every day anyway. It's just a matter of figuring out, how do I respond to each of these different personalities? Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's so right. And the other part of this is when we think about these different decision maker types and how we interact with them, we also want to keep an eye on how they're going to view data just specifically, like not just how you present it to them, but do they get overwhelmed by looking at a graph or a chart? Or you sharing something like that with them? So we've got the alpha dogs. We talk about that kind of a decision maker who really wants to understand what you're going to do for them, and they're really, really cut to the chase. They want to see the data. You might even ask that assertive driver how they interpret the data, because you telling them how the data is interpreted, or you putting a graph or a chart in front of them and saying, this is what the data shows. I want to also understand what they view in that data. What is it that they're seeing? Because if they're going to have their own biases, right? We talked about some of the biases, like we talked about certainty bias, and we talked about overgeneralization, but there's also confirmation bias that comes in on our part as someone who's delivering the data. We have already drawn a conclusion. We've already justified a decision, and we're just putting that data in front of them to kind of support the decision we've already made or the one we want them to come to. And the reality is and that's confirmation bias. They may have their own confirmation bias as well. And so I want to know, what is it that they see? What assumptions are they bringing in to their conclusions? What logical decisions or what logical conclusions are they coming to? And are there assumptions in the data that I'm presenting them that they don't understand? And to your point, Noah, it's not about contradicting them or making them feel small. You're not going to get very far with an assertive driver if that's what you're doing. But when you bring them into the conversation and say, what is this? How do you view this data? Now they have the ability to tell you what they're seeing. And now you can have an elevated conversation where you bring in your credibility. You bring in your, we talk about the four cores of credibility and building trust to Stephen M. R. Covey. And we talk about character and competency. You have the ability then to elevate your competency by having a very intelligent conversation with someone who believes that they know the right answer.
Do you do this by asking a predetermined set of questions? For example, did you do improvements in this place? How much time, how much money did it take? Is there something in the building that you guys are looking at that maybe I'm not looking at because it's just totally wrong and you shouldn't be looking at that anyway? Is that how you do this, by just interacting with a framework of questions that you learn over time?
Yeah. And the questions, my questions used to be something that was much more directed to uncover their personality type. That was that was really
Tricking them.
Yeah. I mean, it was something that was really going to bring it out. But what I've found in the years of doing this is that you can uncover these things by just having a normal conversation with them, and you identify cues. So instead of kind of getting them to tell you who they are, you have a conversation with them and you just start picking up on behaviors and cues, words that they use. If they speak more about feelings, they're probably a collaborative feeler or expressive humanist. If they're talking about something if they're telling stories, they're probably an expressive humanist or collaborative feeler. If there's someone who gives you 10 minutes, says, I've got 10 minutes to speak with you today, give me a call at 2:30, you are probably identifying an assertive driver. Because an analytic thinker does not want a 10-minute conversation. Or if they have a 10-minute conversation, they're sizing you up for 10 minutes to see if they want to have an hour-long conversation to really drill down into the specifics. Okay. So by just having a conversation with people, by walking through their house, to your point, Noah, if you're walking through the house and you're like, oh, looks like you updated the kitchen, tell me about that. And they say, yeah, it cost us $80,000. We did it 2 years ago. I'm not really sure that I like the way that this, that might be data. Or it's like, yeah, this is our favorite room in the house. We just love to be in our kitchen, and it's become kind of our sanctuary. And now I'm picking up on the different cues of who that decision maker is and how I'm going to have a conversation with them about, going back to what we're talking about the data that's going to inform their decisions.
Okay. Analytical thinker, assertive driver, expressive humanist, and what was the last one?
Collaborative feeler.
Okay.
Yeah, and these follow pretty closely to, if you look at the DISC profile, if anybody's ever studied that, it's not straight in line with it, but it talks about personality types, and it's not meant to pigeonhole people or to stereotype people. And people can be a combination of different decision maker types. It doesn't mean that everybody who's an assertive driver is a jerk, or something like that. They could be a combination of styles. And more importantly, you could be working with a mother and daughter, two partners, a husband and wife who have different personality types. And so now you've got to tailor the way that you deliver this data to bring along both of these people, as opposed to just really what oftentimes we do, unfortunately, is the strongest personality in the room is the one that we deliver the one that we communicate with. And so we sometimes start to filter out the second decision maker or the third decision maker because they're not as strong or active in the conversation. And so they're getting further and further behind and further, more and more frustrated. And as we all know, look, as collaborative negotiators, we want to maximize the gain for our side. We want to adequately satisfy the other side and minimally or marginally satisfy any related third parties. So if they're a principal to the negotiation, or even if they're just Uncle Jerry from the Bronx, if they feel like they're being left behind, they could be the reason the trust is or is not established, or the deal does or does not happen.
Awesome. Okay. Great.
Anything else there?
On that element, I think we're good. You have more stuff here, or
yeah, absolutely. I was going to bring in absolutely. I'll keep going and keep asking the questions, because that's where obviously that's where a lot of these nuggets come out, is when somebody has a specific question about the decision maker types, and we can talk for hours on one of these topics, but and we'll cover everything that we can cover today, but there's so much more.
I want persuasion. I want to see what your thoughts are on persuasion. How do we persuade these people? How do we influence those decisions?
Yeah.
Any tactics there?
Yeah. So the big part of, I'll say one other thing about the biases and about the data trap, because there's one other that I think we fall into, and I just want to make sure I don't pass on that.
Sure.
And that's authority substitution. And this happens when especially if we are not a very confident a negotiator, or we're not confident as a real estate professional, maybe you're new to the job, new to the area, something like that, we deliver data as a substitution for our knowledge and our authority, or our client's knowledge and their authority. So we basically throw the paper down and we say, hey, this is what it's telling us. And we let that chart or that graph usurp what actually needs to be a more nuanced conversation. So that's one that I think people should be aware of as well. So how do we...
I have a question for you before you go in. Yeah. How do you communicate? But let me know if this question means you need to talk about something and then go to it. Let me know. How do you communicate bad news, like the data shows we should lower your price?
Yeah. So the question is, does the data say we should lower your price? So the first thing is, if the data is showing that properties are selling at a lower price, or that you're seeing other price reductions, you can use something like an analogy or a metaphor with that client. Because the first thing I would say is, if I'm on the other side of that conversation, is that what your data is actually telling me? Because I don't know. You're showing me a graph. Is that graph telling me that all apartments in Murray Hill, all one-bedroom apartments, are selling at a longer timeline and at a discount? Because I might have an objection to that data. So before I make an assumption of what the data is telling my client, I might want to use an analogy to. First of all, I'll say this: starting those conversations in advance is really important. So before you sit down with a client and have a conversation about a price reduction, what will help you drastically in this conversation is if in the days leading up to that conversation that you know is inevitable, or even when you sat down with them and determined the price to begin with and set expectations about what if we don't see offers, what if we don't see a certain amount of showings, if you've already had that expectation setting, or let's say that you haven't, you're leading up to, look, I see what's happening. We just had 2C lowered their price by 8%, and we're 3C. Right. And now we are $20,000 more expensive than the apartment below us, and they're actually better renovated than us. Right. You may see it very clearly that in order for us to sell, we need to compete with that apartment. It may be very, very clear with you. But leading up to that conversation, being proactive in how you deliver information to your client. So you just want to check in with them frequently, let them know what's going on. Right. Just drop these little breadcrumbs for them. Until then, you have to get down to the conversation. And now that conversation is not about whether you're doing your job correctly or whether you're interpreting data correctly or whether you're showing enough. It becomes less about what you're doing and more about what's happening. And that's where you want them to be in the conversation that's about what's happening, not about what you are or are not doing. And leading up to that conversation can be a huge benefit there. But
Yeah, the
when you're
price
in,
reduction conversation happens pre-listing. That happens like before you even get on day one. You don't bring
yeah,
that up on day 30 for the first time.
right.
That's gonna be because you're going in cold, right? It's just gonna be
You're
so
going in
hard
cold.
to, yeah.
Yeah, but if you haven't had that conversation, you can warm up that cold drink by just like kind of stepping in daily until you get to that conversation where you're
Okay.
actually having the conversation. Hitting someone with that, just remember where they are emotionally, psychologically. I don't care if you're talking about a $50 million apartment or you're talking about a $300,000 apartment. Our clients go through the same emotional. I mean, you talk about it, Noah. You talk about the stages of grief, and you talk
Yes.
about
Yeah.
right.
Love
So
it.
I mean, that's what our doesn't matter where they are, what price point you're talking about, how left brain they are, or how type A they are. They are still going through this emotional journey, whether they want to admit it or not. So we have to understand where they are and how kind of slapping them across the face with "we need to reduce price" is going to create a reaction. They're going to react rather than respond. And what we want to do is create an environment where be they're going to invite the data, invite the analysis, and understand that anything that we are going to do is for their ultimate benefit. And that's the way we want to frame it, right? It's not that we're not reducing price so that you get less. We are adjusting price so that you end up with the most possible money. And you walking through how so this is where clarifying the data matters. You can walk them through what the data means, and then the persuasion piece, the influence piece is, so how, looking forward, does this price adjustment or this price correction or whatever you call it, how does this help us? How does this put us in a better position today to sell your property for the most possible amount of money and the best possible terms? And that's where I want to reframe it, right? And to use the analogy piece I talked about, I'll often talk about a race. You could talk about it as a horse race, a car race. It helps if you really know your client, right? If they're someone who's into food or if there's someone into sports, use an analogy or a metaphor that's going to connect with them. The same way that we talk about, identifying decision makers. So let's say that they are a sports fanatic and they like horse racing, right? You could use a horse racing analogy where you talk about apartment 2C. 2C reduced their price by $20,000. 2C is now in the lead. 2C is winning the race. Now the question is, are we comfortable being in second place or third place? And it may be that we are. I don't want to dismiss the
Mm.
possibility that my client may be willing to wait. And they may be willing to wait for the spring market. There may be reasons why they're reluctant to reduce their price. I want to hear that. I want to understand that so that we can create options. But I do want them to understand this analogy. If apartment 2C is on the market $20,000 less than us, they're leading in the race. Now, the question is, if we're comfortable being in second place, we don't need to make a change. But if we really do want to sell, we want to win the race, we need to compete with 2C. And what we don't know yet is whether 4C or 5C or 6D, another apartment that is similar to our unit in the building or nearby, is going to come on the market while we're still in second place.
Or if 2C is gonna throw you under the bus and then just go cut you and then make a quick spurt ahead of you again.
Yeah, right.
Start
So
a little war.
exactly
Yeah.
now you see all the imagery and they can start to see, how does a horse race work? How do we go into a turn? People are jockeying for position literally in a horse race, and so we see that how that race works, and we can see in our mind what it feels like to have mud being kicked into our face as the other horse is running toward the finish line. And now, as a client, as a decision maker, I say, am I comfortable letting 2C sit on the market until they sell before I sell?
This is borderline brilliant. Let me just tell you why this is so brilliant. Because what you're doing is, instead of you, the agent, playing through all these scenarios in your head and then trying to explain this to your client, you're just creating a situation where your client is playing all the scenarios in their head.
Right.
And they're
Yes.
going to bed thinking about this stuff, and they're playing it out, and they're going to go through that process on their own terms, which is what this whole thing is all about,
That's what
is
it's all
getting them to
about.
make that decision. I love it.
Yeah. And when they own the decision, they are behind the decision. Now, if there are further price reductions or if there are other changes, anything else that has to happen within the deal, I mean, how many times have you as an agent gone back to your client for a second price reduction and you feel like you feel like you were in a war just getting the first price reduction? You had to convince them to do the first price reduction, and now you're going back for another one. What does that say about me? Does that mean I'm a failure? Does that mean I didn't do enough the first time around to sell their right? And now we're back into that mode where we feel like we have to defend ourselves rather than try to help the client get to what is going to be the best possible decision for them. If they own that first one, now we can go back to them and they're more likely to own the next one.
Great. I love it.
Yeah. So we talked about decision makers, which is great. So we've already talked about that. I do want to explain, if we have time. What do we got?
Yeah,
11:30?
you got another half hour.
Oh,
You
great.
take as much time as you want. Just do your
Beautiful.
thing, and people can
Beautiful.
leave if they have to leave. Yeah.
Good. And hopefully you'll stick around because there's so much here. I mean, like I said, this intersection of data and how we deliver information, how we negotiate, and that's what collaborative negotiation is. I mentioned the definition earlier. It's just not kumbaya by the fire, right? It's not holding hands and splitting the pie 50-50. I want to get every ounce of value that I can for my client while adequately satisfying the other side, because I know that's the best way to avert the potential of clawback or retribution on subsequent negotiations throughout the deal. So I want to give them just enough that is going to satisfy them or make them feel that they were treated fairly. And then we have the related third parties. So we want to minimally or marginally satisfy those related third parties, the attorneys, title reps, cousins, aunts, uncles, people that are ancillary to the deal who may not have a financial stake, but they have the interest of the client. So that's what we try to do as collaborative negotiators, is to create value. And so that menu of benefits, this is how you expand your value proposition. So I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that. So I talked about how value is benefits over cost, the cost benefit analysis. So what about those benefits? I talked about features and and benefits, how benefits have utility. What does it do for me? A great analogy of this is the iPhone when it first came, not the iPhone, the iPod. When it first came out, it was the replacement device for us carrying around a box of CDs everywhere we went and having an anti-disc Walkman, and running around with that Walkman jiggling on the side of our belt. And here came the iPod, and the features of the iPod were the weight, the fact that it had a gigabyte of memory or 2 GB, whatever the gigabytes were. None of us remember. Why? Because it's a feature. It doesn't even matter, right? How heavy it was, that had a trackball, that it had a screen, that, it had a plug for your headphones. All of those are features. What Apple did with the iPod is they had one sentence with their marketing platform, and it was 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's the utility, right? What does it do for me? Well, I can envision all of my CDs going away, not carrying around all the jackets and the CD jackets, not having to worry about this anti-skip on my Walkman. It was 1,000 songs in my pocket. I could have almost 100 albums on one device. That's what I needed to know. That's all I needed to know, right? That's utility. So all of the benefits that we come up with need to be framed in a way that is going to help solve that decision maker's problem. And the better you are at asking them questions about what their actual problems are, addressing the objections they have, the better you're going to be able to tailor that menu of benefits. And what I mean by a menu of benefits is exactly what it sounds like. The analogy, the imagery I use is like a diner menu. You keep folding it out. It's got several different pages. There are thousands of items on that diner menu. And you may go to that diner once a month and you probably order the same thing 3 out of the 10 times that you go, right? Even though there are a million things there, you fall back to the things that you know that you like. We do this as agents as well. We give a value proposition and we keep falling back to the one, two, or three things that we always deliver as a benefit to our clients, as opposed to really being thoughtful and creating a real menu of benefits. What are the 100 things that I do? Go back to every deal you've done with a client. Go back to every conversation you've had with a client. Just start by stream of consciousness, writing all of this stuff down, and then market whether you think that that thing is a feature or a benefit. And if you mark it as a feature, how can you turn it into a benefit? What does that thing do for clients? And it may alter a little bit based on the individual client, but that you're going to change that feature into something that actually has utility for a client, a decision maker. And now you have your list, that menu of benefits. And as you know that menu better, now you're in a value proposition. You're hearing your client. You're understanding what is or is not important to them. And now you're just plucking the 3 or 4 or 5 benefits from that menu of benefits, communicating them to them with utility. And now you are going to blow away everybody else that you are competing against, because that's not how people normally go in. They go in with the same old pitch that they give to everybody else. They don't worry. They think of it more as an elevator pitch than a value proposition. They think of a client avatar as opposed to a real person, and they deliver their value proposition the same way each and every time. And you'll find as you do this with your value proposition that the cost part of your value proposition becomes negligible or inconsequential. The client does not have the same objections that they have about the cost side of your value proposition once that you have established all of the benefits that you're going to provide them and tailored them to them.
Excellent. Very, very interesting. Guys, I just want to remind you guys, we have Eirik here for another X amount of minutes until he's done talking here. Any questions for him? I do see one question in a separate form here. I don't know if it really applies to specifically right now what you're talking about. I am presenting a client with her first board package. She just basically told me it's an absurd application. She's not happy. How would you respond to this unhappy customer? Which, again, I guess this can translate in a number of different ways. Just so happens to be the board package in this case.
Yeah. And I mean, that this happens again, either at the beginning of the process where we tell them what a co-op is, or when you put that package in front of them, they're like, they want what, right? So that happens. And we don't play Monday morning quarterback and say, well, obviously we want to have conversations as early as possible, but we all know that there are those clients that no matter what you tell them, no matter how many times you've told them, you put it in front of them and it looks like something they've never heard of in their life. So I hear you, and that's a real problem that I think a lot of agents have. If you're speaking about abort, the first thing that I do is you want to use strategic empathy. You know, Chris Voss talks about strategic empathy. We want to meet them where they are. And a lot of agents will say to a client, well, I'm sorry, that's just the way it goes. You want the apartment, you've got to do this. And ultimately, that may be where we have to go, right? We may have a conversation with them that says, look, we have a couple of choices here. Everyone loves choices. So here are our options. I'm going to put them on the table. We can walk away from our contract deposit, right? That is an option. So I want to put the options on the table. But first, what I want to do is meet them where they are and use that strategic empathy to say, I totally understand. I understand exactly where you're coming from. If you've gone through a board package process as a co-op owner yourself, you can bring in your own personal experience. You could talk about the many, many board packages you've done with other clients and acknowledge that they're not alone. Social proof. You're not the first person that has had this issue with board packages. Yeah. And unfortunately, this process isn't going away anytime soon. So while I understand where you're coming from, I want to hear what specifically about the board package is troubling to you. I want to hear it. There's nothing I can do. They want 4 personal reference letters. We're going to give them 4 personal reference letters, right? But I want to hear what their objections are. One of the worst things we can do as a negotiator is shut down an objection rather than hear it, right? Assume that we know what the objection is and go, you know what? I don't even want to hear it. I know you don't like the reference letters. I know that. I want to hear it. Tell me exactly what it is about the board package that's troublesome to you. Now I can narrow the focus on the things that are really at issue. Then maybe I can provide them the context that they need to understand why the board packet, the board requires this. Part of this is, you've got this inherent good cop, bad cop thing that happens. The client feels in opposition to the board. You're making me do this so that you can tell me whether I am qualified or whether I'm good enough to be in your building. That's what it feels like to a buyer, right? So how do we humanize or demystify the board package process so that the client understands why the co-op is asking for what they ask for? And that, again, they're not alone. This is not specific to them. So those are all the steps that I would go through. And then at the end of that, if you're still stuck with them, you've got to put options on the table. Fighting them, what we call positional bargaining, just going, they're saying, no, I won't. You're saying, yes, you will. That's not going to get you anywhere. So
Yeah.
you want to find out how you can present. Do you want to understand their area of concern and what's driving that area of concern, and then provide options to them. 3, 4 options. You don't want it to be one. You don't want it to be a binary choice. So it's going to make them feel that they are either choosing the right or
Locked
the
in.
wrong option, right?
Right.
You want to give them 3 or 4 options that give them the range of where they could go with this. Like I want to present best and worst case scenario. And you walking away from your contract deposit is probably going to be on my list of options because that is an option for them.
Yeah,
So
it's a fear of an unknown as well, right? I mean,
exactly.
a lot of people don't know what they don't know. They don't know the process. I think the person clarified it's a rental, not a board package, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's the same
Yeah.
thing, right? It's the same. They're looking
Yeah.
at something that they didn't realize what it was. I would also say get ahead of it. Get ahead of it. Let these people know beforehand. Hey, there's going to be an application process. Hey, there's going to be a board package process. It's going to be this big. They are going to ask for your financial statements. They are going to do credit checks. You're going to have to get references. Desensitize them. Like Eric was saying, everyone does this. This is like normal for this part. Get ahead of it so when the time comes, they're exposed to this situation and they've had time to normalize it just a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay.
and like Noah said, it doesn't really matter if it's a rental package. The first thing I would do is
Doesn't matter.
acknowledge I understand. I understand where you're
Yep.
coming from.
Yep.
I know it's frustrating, and I know this is not what you were hoping for from your rental package. I assure you that I'm going to do everything I can to make this as painless as possible for you, and I want to hear what issues you have with this so that I can address them. And
I
you know,
think
it
it's
might be
great.
a what we find sometimes with rental packages or with board packages, whether it's a condo or a co-op, is the disclosure piece, right? It's I feel like I'm giving all of this information away, and I'm not exactly sure who's handling it, right?
Right.
That's a real concern.
It's a real concern,
So,
especially these
so
days.
if that's their concern, if it really does come down to it, and they're like, "Hey, I have real privacy concerns here." All right, I totally understand. Let me then help you understand who is going to be reviewing this package, what happens to the package, and it may not be the answer they want. You've got to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to go get them intel because that's what they need. They need information. And you're going to go get them information, but some of the information you give them may not be what they want. I remember back when I haven't done a physical copy of a board package in a long time, but there was a time when, we'd put 8 board packages in and each board member would get one of these board packages. They required that nothing be redacted, right? And so you got
Yeah.
all this information out there. And I remember I called a managing agent. I'm like, so my client's a little bit concerned about data and about, this all of this private information being out there. What happens when the board package has been approved? What happens to these 8 packages that are out there? And her response to me was, I'm not sure.
That's not convincing.
That's not good. And so, I then that conversation led to, is there a way that we can request, because this client has specific concerns about this, is there a way that I'll do the work, that I can go to the building or go to management, pick up those 8 board packages, take a picture of them, catalog them, go shred them so that my client understands that none of that information is still floating around.
Right.
Maybe
Okay.
I have to do something more, right?
This is good stuff. We got a couple of questions here.
All right.
I have to go one by one here. Just to give you a little backstory here, we had somebody that was asking about that question of what happens if I have to deliver bad news because the price is going to be lower than you think. And I told them in the chat, listen, the market does what the market wants. If something is not selling, it's either a market problem, a product problem, or a price problem. And out of those 3 things, there's only one thing you can control. You can't control the market. You can't control the product. You can control the price. At the end of the day, market does what the market wants. So we have a question here. It says, so Noah mentioned the 3 macro issues, price, market issues, and product problem, which could lend itself to either vagueness or a great starting point. Do you, Eric, have something similar to ground yourself with buyers? I have a lot of buyers that are fearful right now.
Can you repeat that last part?
There are a lot of buyers that are fearful. Do you have a similar groundwork a similar saying to buyers to just ground yourself with them, with the buyers? I have a lot of fearful buyers right now. Basically, it's saying, how do you comfort them?
Well,
A
I
tough
mean,
question. I know.
yeah. I mean, from a comfort standpoint, I would say that my job is not to necessarily comfort them. My job is to inform them and to bring them to a position where they are ready to make a decision, right? And that's the way that we as negotiators we want to get to a place where our client is comfortable making a decision. And I talk about this. There's a little off, but I'll come back to the question. I have this framework that I talk about called the influence meter, and this is not something you necessarily share with your clients or your buyers, but it's something that you should be internally thinking about. And it's this idea that when I talked about creating a binary choice, two options for your client, the same thing it goes when we're talking about how people make decisions. People do not make decisions in a binary way. They do not look at two decisions and say, I'm a yes or I'm a no. They're on a continuum. So if we think about a continuum of 0 to 100, 0 being a hard no, and yes being a hard yes, our clients are often somewhere on that continuum. They could be at a 46 and on a no. They're less than 50. They're saying no, but it could be because they're bringing in some assumption or there's some misunderstanding. There's something that they don't have enough clarity on that hasn't gotten them to 52, 53, 54. And sometimes it's just having a conversation where we put our clients in a position to make a decision with all of the information that they need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so,
I think that's the answer right there. All the information they need. And I think your little empathy element is a good
yeah,
start for that point. Like,
definitely.
I understand why it's fearful out there right now. There's a lot of things going on. Hey, if you're fearful, then that seller is probably more fearful, and there might be some value opportunities as well. But no, give them the information, give them the clarity. Stop letting them flying blind. They fly blind with no instrumentation. They have no idea what's going on. They're not going to make any decision. It's just going to create pause type of thing.
Correct. And the other part of this is, as I think that when we get stuck with a buyer who's feeling like they're just spinning their wheels. Like this happened this morning. I was taking my daughter to school, and there was this woman trying to get out of the snowbank, right? And we could see it 2 blocks away, like smoke is coming up because her tires are just spinning against the asphalt, but the car is stuck in a snowbank. And so and growing up in Minnesota, I said to my 11-year-old daughter, I said, look, okay, when you get old enough to drive a car, I want you to know how this works. Because what people do is they jump in their car knowing they got this big, powerful engine. They slam on the accelerator and their wheels just spin. And they're just spinning. And they're creating smoke and they're not going anywhere. But they're only one person in a car. They can't get out and push themselves. So until somebody comes and helps them, they're just going to be spinning their wheels, literally spinning their wheels. And so what we were taught growing up in Minnesota is you need to rock the car, right? My good friend Dale Line is on this call, and I'm sure he knows exactly what I'm talking about, being a Minnesotan. You rock the car, you put it into drive, and you move forward a little bit. And then you put it in neutral and you rock back. And then you put it in reverse and you go back. And you start this momentum where you start to rock back and forth until you can get over that snowbank. That's how you get out of a snowbank if you're all alone in a car. And I think it's this great analogy about how sometimes our clients feel stuck and they just are hitting the accelerator as hard as they possibly can and going nowhere and getting more and more frustrated. And eventually that rubber on that tire is going to give, or, whatever's going to happen. It's not going to be good for the car and it's not going to be good for them. So sometimes what we need to do with our buyers and with our sellers when it comes to offering options, because again, this all comes back to putting options on the table. I think about price, size, location, amenities, and time. So if my client is looking in a specific type of building, in a specific type of neighborhood, and a specific type of price point, sometimes what they need to hear is the options exist for them. They exist outside of the world of apartments that we're currently in. We've got to step outside of this room or this world or whatever the analogy is or metaphor is and step into something else. There are options for you. I want you to know, client, that the options are out there for you. And if we
Yeah.
sit down and we explore the different options that are available to you in different neighborhoods, maybe in a walk up rather than an elevator building, maybe it's lower common charges, but you don't get as many amenities. Whatever that is, we change the world of apartments slightly. And now it's not about them screaming into the void about how they're caught and they're stuck and they don't have any options. Now it's a matter of whether they want to stay with the options that how tightly wound or how inelastic are these variables, or how elastic is there one of them that's elastic, because that could open the door to 3 or 4 new possibilities. And right now they got foot on the accelerator and they're just
Yeah,
spinning.
they're going in circles. They're not going anywhere. I just thought of something from a while ago. I haven't transacted in so long. My goodness gracious. For those of you that don't know me, I used to be a buyer's broker primarily. I did most of my
I
deals
remember.
on the buyers. That was a long time ago. And I remember Bifolio. I don't remember Bifolio,
Oh
the
yes.
Daimler, Susan and Matt Daimler.
Yeah.
It was a great system. And they had, when it was fearful buyers came up in one of the sessions that Susan was doing, and she's like, listen, I've had some success with a tactic. Use whatever collaboration system you want. UrbanDigs has a collaboration system. I don't, you guys probably have your own, but basically you have a buyer A, B, C, D, all different buyers. They're all watching things. Buyers are very good at picking out the best of the best at the best price, the best units at the lowest price. They're very good at getting the cream that goes to the top. But you know
Yeah.
what happens? Over time, those properties go into contract, right? So here's your buyer, right? The buyer's fearful. You're right. You find out, you collaborate with him, you discuss with him the properties that he's really keeping his eyes on, the property that he likes as just a watch
Mm.
list. And over time, you take a look at that 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, chances are high a number of those properties are going to go into contract. And what's going to make that fearful buyer maybe get more grounded in reality is that the market is actually engaging on the exact same properties that he's identifying that he's interested in
Mm.
and watching. And
That's
what Susan
great.
was saying on the when she was presenting at Redney, I remember this vividly. And she's like, "Listen, it's going to take a buyer who's completely scared and say, 'Oh my God, the 6 best properties I saw are now gone.' Chances are you're going to find that 7th property. It's going to be active. You might make a move that you otherwise didn't because you have a little more comfort that you got your eyes on the right prizes that are out there." And it works.
Oh,
It's just a natural process that the buyer goes through and sees. A lot of us agents don't really do that type of analysis or watch listing and then follow up type of thing because it's just too hard. It's too much stuff to do. But think about it. There's a
I
tech.
I think you've just, I mean, it's a great tactic, and I think that you've just kind of encapsulated how data and the interpretation of data can then lead to
And
decisions,
collaboration.
right?
Yeah.
And a collaboration. So I can, if I'm putting forward data that actually says, that speaks something, past behavior that's going to inform future behavior, right?
Yeah.
So I'm putting data in front of you that is clearly showing what is happening across this subset of apartments. And so, what is the conclusion? Well, when apartment 7 comes on the market, we should anticipate that that apartment is going to be in contract within a week. The
Yeah.
question is, what price is that apartment going to come on the market at? How quickly can we see it? And how quickly are we willing to move forward? I want my client in a position where they're willing to make a decision. And that kind of data puts them right in the framework of saying, got it. Okay, now I'm ready to compete. And this is not I'm a collaborative negotiator. Influence and
Right.
persuasion does not have to be manipulation. I am acting in the interest of my client. I'm trying to persuade and influence them to do what is in their interest. I don't act against my client's interest. They're the ultimate decision maker. But when you're using data to inform future behavior, to inform what's going to happen next time, that becomes very clear for that client. And now they can anticipate what their behavior is going to be when that happens.
Awesome. Last call, guys. Last call for questions for Eric. Listen, I'm all about networking at this site. You guys know this right now. I'm trying my best to bring in great minds around the industry so that we could collaborate at a place and learn. That's what everything is all about. Nothing would make me feel better than you guys reaching out to Eric afterwards saying thank you. I appreciate that. Stay in touch. You never know when you might talk down the road or do a deal or anything like that. But I'm going to say final call. Final call right now for questions, Eric. I guess we got 60 seconds, unless it's questions. Oh, here we got one here. Good. You see, sometimes the final
Yeah,
call
look at
rings
that.
again.
You ask and you shall receive.
Exactly. How would you advise a buyer who has consistently seen exceedingly high monthlies due to expiring tax abatements in Harlem? Oh, very
Oof.
specific. Very specific question.
Yeah.
But you know what? Expiring rising monthlies, expiring tax revenue probably will see a slight pressure on the price that you otherwise wouldn't see. You know, these new developments, guys, I am noticing some stuff with these new developments. A decay factor. A decay factor because over time the abatements go away and the expenses go up. So that initial beautiful zero abatement element that erodes over time, and the market compensates on price. I'm also noticing a decay factor with renovations in new development. I am seeing this in the
Mm.
data. It's hard to aggregate it in a wide level and show some really good stuff. It's very noisy, but I'm noticing situations where, you know what, year one, that renovation's 100% valued, but now 10 years later, the abatement's gone. The stuff is good, but it's not brand new. There's a decay force there that might also pressure elements over there. I would say just hit it head on and let them know that the market should compensate for those higher monthlies via the lower price. It should balance itself out. At the end of the day, no one needs to force a seller to sell. Nobody. So if the seller's not, or the developer, if they choose not to do it, then they just don't see the interest at that price point. There's nothing you can do about it. Right? Try to
I,
compensate, but you may not succeed. Just try.
this is where data and intel is going to be your friend. Um, Understanding what the step ups of tax abatements are and being able to communicate that very, very clearly to your client. It seems, James, from the way that you wrote your question, that this is something that you are well versed in, but understanding how the step ups work so that your client knows that it's not that taxes are not going up above the taxable value. They've just been there's been a savings of money over time that's
Right.
been realized. And as that goes away, they are going to be like everybody else in the playing field where
Like
they're
everyone
paying
else.
full taxes. So you might, in order to help them see through that, you might say, let's look at what the tax savings was over the last few years of that step ups. Maybe, if you're at 80% now and the taxes are 1,200, and you can kind of go, if we were in the 100% range now, what would that 1,200 look like? Okay, what does 60% of that range look like over the year? What is the savings on that abatement? So that they can then understand, maybe, like as Noah said, maybe that money can be made up and then some on getting a discounted price on the property. If it's $12,000 that they're upset that they would have saved if there were a tax abatement in place when they bought it, maybe we can help them save that $12,000 somewhere else.
Or give them the secondary option of, you know what, you could go find a new development yourself, pay a little bit more of a premium, experience the savings yourself, and then you could pass this on in 10 years time or 12, 15 years time to somebody else, but you might go through the same pressure situation as you're experiencing now with those maturing developments. You
Yeah.
could flip it, give them both the options, say this is our choice.
Yeah, that
Yep,
comparison would be good. Yeah, would be good to see what's
good
happening
stuff.
with abated properties versus ones that have expired, where they're not, where they're just full blown taxes, and you look at them, try to get an apples to apples comparison,
Yep.
or to see the differential.
I love it. I love it.
This is
Great stuff. Well, thank you for coming. I mean, I
oh
really, really appreciate it. Could you guys give him a thank you in the comments? He's looking at the comments,
thank
guys.
you.
Give him a thank you. You know, he didn't have to do this. I really appreciate this. Eririk Gislason, Archway Partners. Archway
Archway
Partners.
Partners Coaching is my coaching company.
Yeah.
Look me, you can reach
Thank
me
you,
at,
guys.
thank you, everybody. I appreciate that.
It
Thanks,
feels
Dale.
good when you see that,
Oh,
right? I
thank
mean,
you, bud.
see, look at the
Look
joy
at
in his
that.
face. Look, I mean, I got to tell you, this is look. It's not only women that need compliments and an occasional pair of shoes. Us men, we need compliments too. You got to tell us we're doing good. We need
I
it,
accept
guys.
every one of
Trust
them.
me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you can reach out to me. You can do info@archwaypartnersinc.com or Eirik, EIRIK, two strange Eric spelling with two I's, at archwaypartnersinc.com. And if you're at Inman today or tomorrow, I'll be at Inman. Find me at Inman. I have a podcast called Shearline, all about negotiation. It's on the More Network. So check out, it's SHEAR line. And we're doing a live taping of that podcast from the Inman Connect conference today at 2 p.m. So I'll be there. The podcast is all about different facets of negotiation. Today's happens to be on culture. So we'll take something that's tangentially related to negotiation, and we'll apply it to negotiation through all of the things that we were just talking about over the last hour.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you, Eirik Gislason, Brown Harris Stevens, Archway Partners. I appreciate you guys. This will be up on UrbanDigs hopefully in a day or so in case you missed it. I hope there's a lot of connections being made. I wish you all the success in the world, and I thank you guys. God bless.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck out there, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.